At Christmas dinner Dad announced, "You burden and always embarrassed me." I looked at him and said, "You mean like when I paid off your gambling debt and never told Mom?" Suddenly, my little sister whispered, "You did what?" "Rowan, I can't believe you didn't tell us." I remember Nora's voice trembling, not out of anger, yet, but from confusion. Hurt. And maybe something else, regret. I shrugged, standing in my own kitchen that Christmas evening, staring out at the snow-laced backyard through the window over the sink. I didn't look back at her when I said it. I didn't want to ruin what little peace we had left. I never wanted to be the one who blew up the family. I wasn't that person. In fact, I was the one who kept the glue in place longer than it should have lasted. I was the fixer. The silent one. The responsible older daughter. And I was tired. This all started years ago, but if I had to pick a moment when the truth snapped free, it was Christmas 2023. A day that, up until dessert, felt, almost, normal. The snow had been falling steadily since noon in Erie. That thick, soft kind of snow that coats everything in white and quiets the world. I had the fireplace running, the table set for 8, a mix of Christmas classics and jazz playing on my Bluetooth speaker. Mom and Dad showed up on time. That alone was a miracle. They even brought something, a store-bought cake Mom had placed in a tin with parchment to make it look homemade. Classic. Nora arrived with her fiancé Evan, both flushed and wind-bitten from the walk from their car. Aunt Seela and Uncle Dave had driven in from Buffalo. And then there was Grandma Willa, quieter and slower than last year, but still sharp when she wanted to be. The food was good, the wine flowed, the tension was low. For once. And then Dad opened his mouth. He waited until dessert. My pecan pie had barely been sliced. Everyone was laughing about some story Nora told about Evan's clumsy attempt at assembling IKEA furniture. Just as the laughter was dying down, Dad leaned back in his chair, set his bourbon glass on the table, and said, completely out of nowhere, "You know, Rowan, you've always been a burden. Always embarrassed me. Since you were a kid." The words fell like a blade on the table. Not loud, not angry, just cold and sure, like he was stating a fact everyone secretly already knew. I didn't say anything right away. No one did. I looked around. Mom's face was blank, like she'd been slapped but wasn't sure it had happened. Nora's lips parted, eyes darting between us. Evan looked down into his wine. I took a breath. I felt the tension that had been building for years coil inside me like a spring finally tightening to the breaking point. I said it calmly. No tears. No shouting. Just quiet and deliberate. "You mean like when I paid off your gambling debt and never told Mom?" Silence. Everyone just stared. Then Nora, so softly it was almost a breath, said, "You did what?" I'll rewind. You deserve context. I left Erie right after college. Got a job in Seattle, built a life, married a man I shouldn't have but thought I could love into being someone else. Spoiler, that didn't work. By 35, I was divorced, tired, and working remotely in a soulless data analyst job. In 2017, Dad called me in a panic. Told me he needed help. He was desperate. He didn't say what for at first, he just asked for money. A lot of money. When I pushed, he cracked. Said he owed money to the wrong people. He'd been gambling for years, and things had finally caught up to him. He was scared someone might show up at the house. He begged me not to tell Mom. I was horrified, but I paid it. $48,000. Every cent from the condo sale I'd planned to use for my future. Gone. But I wired it anyway. Not because I thought he deserved it, but because I was afraid. Afraid for my mom. For Nora. For the fragile balance of this family I'd been trying to protect from afar. I carried that secret for 6 years. Every time I saw him, every time he looked smug, or made a comment about how I chose a divorce like it was a dirty word, I held my tongue. Every time he praised Nora's choices and criticized mine with a veiled look, I swallowed it. Until Christmas 2023. After I said it, the room broke. Mom dropped her fork. Nora's eyes were wide and red-rimmed. Dad said nothing. Just stared at me like I'd pulled a blade out of my purse. You paid it? Mom said. Her voice cracked. Almost 50 grand, I said. He called me sobbing. I sold my condo. Used the money. Didn't tell anyone. Thought it'd buy peace. No one moved. Dad finally stood up, his hand slightly trembling, and tried to speak, but nothing came out. Nora was the one who asked the question that changed everything. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her. Because you still saw him as a hero, I said. I didn't want to take that from you. I'll stop here for now. It's been 3 weeks. My mom hasn't spoken to Dad since that night. She's staying with a friend and looking at apartments. Nora is talking to me more than she has in years. Evan dropped off a bottle of wine the other day with a quiet, "Thank you for protecting them." I don't feel like a hero. I feel tired. Hollow. But also, relieved? The weight is gone. And now there's room for truth. Not sure what happens next. But for the first time in my life, I feel like I did the right thing. Even if it broke everything. The first few days after Christmas were strangely quiet. Not just in my house, but everywhere. Erie felt like it had swallowed its voice. The snow kept falling, now more gray than white, and the once cheery wreath on my front door hung there like it was tired of pretending to. Mom didn't call. Nora didn't text. And Dad, well, I had no reason to expect anything from him. But my mind wouldn't let it rest. Not the scene, not the aftermath. I'd run over it again and again. The silence in the room when I said it. The flicker of something, shame, maybe fear, in Dad's eyes. The way Mom's shoulders had sunk, like something inside her had given out. I didn't cry. Not once. I thought maybe something was wrong with me because of that. But it wasn't numbness. It was something closer to acceptance. Or exhaustion. By New Year's Eve, I got a message from Nora. Can I come by? Just me. I said yes. She showed up in jeans and a long coat, no makeup, hair tied back like she hadn't bothered with a mirror. She looked older than she had the week before. Not in a bad way, just more aware. Like she'd been walking through fog and finally saw what was in front of her. We didn't hug. Just sat. I made tea. We didn't even talk for the first 15 minutes. Finally, she broke the silence. Did he ever thank you? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. No, she looked at me like she was about to apologize. I stopped her. Don't, I said. You didn't know. I didn't want you to know. But I should have seen it, she murmured. The way he always acted with you. That made something in me clench a little. I hadn't expected her to say that. I always thought Nora saw what she wanted to see, that she'd chosen the fantasy. Look, I said, we both saw different versions of him. You got the good dad. The bedtime stories. The softball coach. I got the man who drank too much and told me I was too intense for anyone to ever love. Her eyes glassed over. But she didn't cry. He used to tell me I was the easy one, she said. Said you made everything hard. That stung more than I thought it would, but I nodded. Yeah, I whispered. I was always too much of something. 2 days later, Mom called. She asked if I had time for lunch, her voice strained but deliberate. She chose a little diner off 12th Street, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and chipped mugs that never seemed to run out of lukewarm coffee. We sat in the back. I'd never seen her like that. Not even when Grandma Willa had her stroke. She looked like someone who'd had a rug pulled out from under them and was still trying to understand how they'd been standing on it for so long. I always thought I knew everything, she said quietly, stirring her coffee though she didn't add anything to it. About my marriage. About my family. I thought I had this sense. Intuition. You did the best you could, I said, not really knowing if I meant it. She stared at me for a long time, as if she was reading a book she hadn't opened in years. I ignored a lot, she admitted. He always had this charm. That smile. He'd say something awful and then crack a joke or bring home flowers. And I let it go. I let too much go. You weren't the only one. She reached across the table and touched my hand. I don't remember the last time she did that. Probably not since I was a kid. I'm so sorry you went through that alone. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. But I didn't pull my hand away. I think the hardest part of all this is not the betrayal, it's the relearning. Relearning your own history. Your memories. Your truths. When someone as central as a father turns out to be someone else entirely, it forces you to re-examine everything he touched. Which, in my case, was everything. Like how he was the one who pushed me to go into business instead of art. There's no money in painting, he said. You'll end up broke and bitter. I believed him. I locked that part of me away for years. Or how he discouraged me from speaking up in school, telling me, Rowan, you don't always have to be right. Like confidence was something shameful. Like being smart was dangerous. These little messages, drip-fed over decades, became the internal voice I used to judge myself. It took one night to mute that voice. And now, in its place, there's something quieter. Not kinder yet, but quieter. As the weeks passed, more truths came out. Nora told me Dad had asked her for money once too. Just $2,000, for a temporary thing, back in 2020. She said she gave it to him without asking questions. Said he paid it back a month later. She cried telling me that, not because of the money, but because she realized he'd been testing who he could manipulate. Mom found old bank statements. Gambling site withdrawals. Loans she never knew he took out. She didn't tell me all the details, but she told me enough. He was never who I thought he was, she said over the phone one night. And I think deep down, I always knew. I haven't heard from Dad directly. But he sent a letter. Handwritten. 6 pages. It arrived a month after Christmas. I haven't opened it yet. It's sitting in my drawer. Sometimes I stare at it. Wonder what he wrote. Wonder if it's a confession or another manipulation wrapped in nostalgia and cheap regret. Part of me wants to burn it. Another part wants to read it aloud, with Nora and Mom there, like a courtroom. Evidence on the table. But I don't. Not yet. Not because I'm scared of what's inside. But because, for the first time in my life, I don't need anything from him, not even an explanation. February rolled in quietly. In Erie, that meant gray skies, crunchy snow, and more salt on the roads than on the dinner table. It also meant too much time indoors and too much space in your head for unresolved things. The letter from Dad stayed in my drawer. I moved it once, to dust. That's it. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not what it said, I still hadn't opened it, but the fact that it existed at all. It felt like a ghost. Not threatening, just lingering, watching me from inside a sealed envelope, daring me to let it speak. Nora asked about it a week into February, when we met for a walk through Frontier Park. We'd been walking more lately. Talking more too. It was the kind of slow rebuild I didn't think we'd ever have. She was opening up in ways I'd never seen before. So, did you read it yet? She asked, kicking at a pile of snow with the toe of her boot. No, I said. Not ready. Do you think you will? Eventually. She nodded, and that was it. No pressure. No suggestions. Just understanding. That was new. I think what struck me the most in all of this was how much Nora had started seeing our childhood through a new lens. Not just the memories, but the meaning behind them. He used to make fun of you when you cried, she said suddenly, unprompted, as we crossed over a little footbridge. Remember that? I didn't respond right away. I remember, I finally said. I just didn't think anyone else did. I remember thinking you were too sensitive, she said, eyes down. Because that's what he told me. He'd say, don't be like Rowan, always making a scene. I guess I believed him. I stopped walking. Not out of anger, but because I felt this weight pressing on my chest. Not heavy, but deep. I know, I said. You were a kid. We both were. She looked at me then, really looked. Like she was seeing me for the first time. I think you were just the only one who saw through him. Mom had started therapy. That, in itself, was a miracle. A woman who once told me, we don't air dirty laundry to strangers, was now meeting a therapist twice a month and even asked me for a book recommendation about boundaries. She told me something during one of our coffee catch-ups that stuck with me. I spent 35 years trying to keep the image of a marriage alive, she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. But I think I was more in love with the version of him I created than the man himself. I nodded slowly. That's what makes it so hard to leave, isn't it? You're not just leaving a person, you're leaving the fantasy. She gave me a small smile. Sounds like you've been to therapy longer than I have. We laughed. For real this time. It felt strange, sharing laughter with her without bitterness underneath. For the first time, it felt like we were two women rebuilding a relationship, not just a mother and daughter dancing around each other's wounds. One night, I pulled out an old box from my closet. It had been with me since Seattle. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were journals, photographs, ticket stubs, birthday cards. The kind of things you think you'll want one day when you're older and looking back. There was a photo of Dad and me at my high school graduation. I remember that day. I had been accepted into 3 colleges. He shook my principal's hand with pride, then spent the car ride home telling me how the scholarships weren't real, just ways for the school to look generous. He couldn't even let me have that. I put the photo back in the box. Not out of anger. Just because it no longer held the weight it used to. I wasn't trying to erase him from my life. I just wasn't going to let him narrate it anymore. The letter stayed sealed. Sometimes I would open the drawer and look at it, my hand hovering over it, wondering if this was the moment. But I always closed the drawer again. I told myself I'd open it when I was ready, but I wasn't sure I'd ever be. And maybe that was okay. One morning, about a month after the Christmas dinner, I got a call from Evan. Nora was at work, and he'd been helping Mom move a few things into her new place, a small but bright apartment near the lake. I found something in a box, he said. Thought you might want to see it. It was an old journal. Not mine. Mom's. Apparently, she used to write things down during her early marriage, notes, entries, thoughts. She'd forgotten about it entirely. When I flipped through it that night, what struck me wasn't what she wrote about my dad, though some of it was jarring, but what she'd written about me. Rowan is so smart. Too smart for her age. I worry she sees things she shouldn't. Rowan asked me tonight if Daddy was mad at her. He wasn't. He was mad at me. But I told her it was just a bad day. Rowan cries a lot. I don't know how to help her. I feel like she's carrying something I can't see. I closed the journal and sat with it for a long time. She had seen it. Even back then. She just didn't know what to do about it. I think that's the part that's hardest for me to accept, the idea that so much damage was done not just because of one man, but because so many of us were too scared or too confused to name what we were feeling. So we didn't. We just lived through it. Quietly. Separately. Until the day it all broke loose. Christmas wasn't a turning point. It was a reckoning. One that had been coming for decades. And now we were all learning to live in the ruins of what we thought was a family, slowly, piece by piece, trying to build something new with what was left. By early spring, something had changed in me. Not dramatically, not in some Hollywood montage kind of way. But enough. Enough that I started sleeping better. my jaw unclenched during conversations. My phone didn't give me anxiety every time it buzzed. I was moving through the world a little lighter. A little clearer. Dad, however, had been silent. Not a phone call. Not an email. Just that one letter, still unopened, still sitting in my drawer like a stone I no longer needed to carry. Part of me was waiting, for what, I wasn't sure. An apology? An admission? A real, unfiltered moment of remorse? It never came. But something else did. One afternoon, Nora texted me, "Check your email ASAP." Attached was a PDF. A draft copy of our father's retirement announcement. His company, a mid-sized manufacturing firm in Erie, was throwing him a celebratory dinner, with speeches, catered food, the works. A retirement party scheduled for June. Apparently, he'd spun a golden image of himself as a community-minded businessman, family man, local icon. "Did you see the part about the family tribute?" Nora texted, then, "He listed us as speakers." I stared at my screen. I could almost hear his voice, "Let's show them what a perfect family looks like." That's when I knew. I wasn't going to read his letter. I didn't need to. I didn't care what he had to say anymore. Instead, I was going to give my speech. The party was held in a banquet hall at a country club just outside Erie. One of those places with pale yellow walls, overpriced wine, and an inflated sense of self-importance. Dad wore a navy suit. Mom didn't come. She said she was busy. Nora came, though. We sat together, drank ginger ale, and waited. The room was full of people he'd curated, coworkers, clients, old neighbors, even a few of his golf buddies. Everyone was smiling, clapping, giving him that congratulatory shoulder pat. And then it was time for speeches. The MC called Nora first. She walked up, smiled politely, and kept it short. "My father always believed in the power of appearances," she said with a little smirk. "And for a long time I did too. But lately, I've come to value what happens when the masks come off. So, here's to honesty." A few people clapped. Dad gave her a confused smile. Then they called me. Rowan Harper, his eldest daughter. He looked at me, finally, maybe for the first time in months. I walked up to the podium slowly, calmly, heels clicking across the floor. I could see his posture shift. He knew something was coming. But he didn't know what. I took a breath. And I told the truth. Growing up with my father was complicated. He taught me how to fix a leaky pipe. How to calculate interest. How to mow a lawn in perfectly straight lines. But he also taught me how to walk on eggshells. How to stay silent to keep the peace. And how to carry secrets so heavy they change the shape of your life. You could hear a pin drop. In 2017, I paid off a gambling debt that could have cost him everything, including his home, his marriage, and the image he spent decades building. He asked me to keep it quiet, and I did. 4 years. Because I thought protecting him would make him love me. Make me enough. A woman in the front row gasped. I kept going. But what I've learned since is this: we are not responsible for the damage others do when they refuse to grow. We are not required to carry their shame in place of their accountability. I looked straight at him. Dad, you don't get to tell your version of the story anymore. I've taken that power back. I walked off the stage, my hands steady. Nora stood as I approached and hugged me in front of everyone. Some people clapped. Most didn't. Didn't matter. He didn't stand. He didn't speak. He just sat there. Silent. That night, I drove home with the windows down. The Erie air was humid, but it felt good. Freeing. The next day, I got an email from a local journalist who had been at the event, apparently invited to write a piece on local business heroes. He'd been intrigued by my speech. He asked if I'd be open to an interview. I thought about it for 2 days. Then I said yes. Not to shame my father publicly. Not for revenge in the petty sense. But because I was tired of people like him being celebrated while people like me, like my mom, like Nora, were left carrying their damage in silence. The article wasn't scandalous. But it was honest. It talked about image, about silence, about generational harm and emotional debt. And about how some daughters grow up believing they're broken, when really, they were just used. It went a little viral locally. Dad resigned from a few local boards shortly after. He never called. I never expected him to. Mom framed a copy of the article. It sits on the shelf in her new place, next to a small painting I gave her, one I made myself. A simple watercolor of the lake, with a single sailboat drifting into the horizon. She smiled when she opened it. You found your way back to it, she said. The painting. I think I'm finally ready to start living for myself, I told her. You always were, she said. You just didn't know it yet. As for Nora and me, we talk almost every day now. We've become what I always hoped we could be, sisters who know each other, not just share a past. And me? I'm building something new. Not fast. Not flashy. But mine. And Dad? He still lives in the same house. Still tries to present the same version of himself to the few people who'll let him. But the thing about truth is, once it's out, it echoes. And he can't control the narrative anymore. That, I think, is the most satisfying part. He's not dead. He's not suffering in some dramatic way. But he's irrelevant to the version of me that's finally free. And I didn't have to become cruel to get there. I just had to stop pretending he was something he wasn't.